not everyone's going to be able to show up at 3 p.m. on a Thursday to go to your webinar. They're just not. People are busy, they're in other meetings or they get called away or whatever. So to not give them the opportunity to consume some of that in smaller form is crazy.
You're listening to the Content 10x podcast, where it's all about content repurposing. I'm Amy Woods, and I'm here to help you maximize your content and find smart ways to get your message in front of more of the right people, whilst also saving time. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Content 10x podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, the founder of Content 10x. And this week we have a fantastic guest interview to share with you. Now, my guest is Jonathan Bland, and Jonathan is the co-founder of Omni Lab. Omni Lab is a demand gen agency for seed to Series C B2B SaaS companies, and they help their clients build a pipeline they can be proud of. Now, they do this by managing and optimizing paid media across digital channels and distributing content and messaging via paid to grow pipeline and revenue. Now, over the last 14 years, Jonathan has worked for 4 VC-backed SaaS companies. He's consulted with more than 100. He's helped one get acquired, one reach unicorn status, and he's helped them generate millions in net revenue. He's also seen a handful of those startups go out of business too, including his own SaaS business. So he knows many of the mistakes as well as the successes. In this episode of the Content 10x podcast, we talk about how to repurpose a webinar into social media videos and ads. We look at how to run effective ads to dramatically improve the ROI of your webinar, what makes an ad stand out, what type of ads work, what types of ads don't work, and so much more. This is a fantastic conversation and something that we've not really spent an awful lot of time talking about on the Content 10x podcast in terms of bringing together the world of content repurposing and paid social. I'm sure you're going to really enjoy it, so let's jump in. Jonathan, welcome to the Content 10x podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yep, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation, so thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
To get started, in summary, could you just explain what you guys do at Omni Lab and, of course, your role in it all as well?
Yeah. So one of the co-founders, we're at the end of the day a demand gen agency. We work with B2B SaaS companies specifically, and our primary goal is driving pipeline for them by using paid ads. And that could be Google Ads, Bing, YouTube, display, LinkedIn, et cetera, on and on. Basically any paid digital channel. In addition with that, we also work on a lot of the ad creative too. So whether it's static image ads, whether it's carousels, or even repurposing a webinar into clips and things like that, we'll do a little bit of that work for them and then get it out into the channel. But I think the big point for us is that everything that we're trying to do is making sure that the conversions that we are generating are quality, they meet the ICP, and that there's a strong conversion rate to pipeline. And while, we don't have complete control over all these elements, we definitely start looking at that data all the time across every single client to make sure that we're ultimately driving the right types of objectives, because it's not about just the number of leads, it's about the quality. And I think everyone would agree here that you'd much rather have a 3x conversion rate off of leads coming through than 3x the leads that have, a much lower conversion rate. So that's generally the goal for us.
Yeah, brilliant. Just keen to know, what brought about the specialization? So you said B2B SaaS. Is there a reason that you've deeply specialized in that particular area?
Yeah, I mean, the honest truth is I spent about a decade working for B2B SaaS companies, so
Yeah.
I was working for US government, for a government reseller selling security software at one point, and then went in the business intelligence space for a while at another SaaS company. So it was kind of just jumping from a lot of different companies like that. And interestingly, I actually started out in sales. I wasn't actually a marketer from the beginning. And I think I know quite a few marketers that seem to have this story.
Yeah.
And so I spent time as an SDR and AE. I was one following up with ebook downloads and all sorts of types of leads and all things like that. But I was never one of those people that really stayed in one role. So I kind of jumped around a little bit, and I was always going to talk to the product and marketing team about stuff. So at the end of the day, I kind of found my way into doing marketing, mostly out of just kind of luck of some people asking me for some help around some stuff. And we just started doing a little bit of consulting, and then it turned into an agency. So That's kind of how it happened. I wish I could say it was heavily premeditated with 2 years and a 60-page business plan, but it just, we kind of fell into it. So
Yeah. And the rest is history.
yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, you already touched on this when you were explaining what you guys do, but one of the main reasons I wanted to invite you on the show and was really excited about this conversation was after I saw you present at our client metadata's demand event, and you talked about, as you mentioned already, repurposing webinars into social media content and then running ads on that social to,
Yeah.
get bigger results. And you share really inspiring results. So I wanted to dig into that. And I guess the
Yeah.
first question, just kind of at the very top end of this, is before we talk about the repurposing, what are your webinars for you guys when you're running webinars? What's the sort of purpose and format of the webinars? Why have you found webinars to be a good method for you guys?
I think it's one use case. I mean, I think it's an easy one because I think a lot of SaaS companies are running webinars of some kind on a monthly
Yeah.
basis. So the webinar is an easy one to go to, and usually there's a lot more assets there. Not as many SaaS companies have a podcast, which would to me be another form of long form content where you could,
Yeah.
record it just like we're doing right now, and then obviously repurpose this podcast, which I'm sure you guys do. But yeah, I think the webinar is interesting because there's usually a library of a lot of content already existing on the website. And usually our first go-to is taking a look at that content library. And no matter if it's a year old or 3 months or 6 months, a lot of times, a lot of that content's still really relevant. And I think everyone has this mindset, and we all do as marketers. We're always chasing the next piece of content. It's like, all right, we did that, and now we need to run over to this other one. And it's not that you never need new content again, you can repurpose forever. I think there's clearly new content that needs to be produced. But you can still take, for example, in a webinar, and this is what I talked about in metadata, you could take a webinar that you promoted, say, really well, and I guess to even back up, the typical motion for a lot of SaaS companies, just to kind of put some context around it, is you start to work on a webinar and you promote it really well on organic, paid, your email list, or whatever other channels. You get people to that webinar. And then after the webinar, here's another recording, at minimum, at least for the people that signed up for the webinar. And then you throw it on your website with a gate usually, and that's it. And then it just kind of dies there in the graveyard. And people just, you don't look at it again. And I think, the opportunity I think here is this area, wait a minute, like we can actually take that really great piece of content that got tons of engagement. There were great questions. There was great AMA at the end of it or whatever it may be. And let's actually just break up a couple core pieces and the highlights of this webinar, use them in paid or organic, either or. I'm not totally biased to paid. Organic's still an extremely valuable channel, especially from personal profiles. And then start repurposing that. You can drastically, 10x easy, reach in the amount of consumption of that content and directly to your ICP in the world of paid. So I'll stop myself there. But yeah, I think webinar is a great, easy lift, and it's just not too difficult to start breaking up some of these clips pretty quickly. So
Yeah. Yeah. So is it specifically video clips that you are taking from them for your repurposing then? So
100%.
slicing and
Yeah,
dicing.
video.
Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
and I actually went back and had a quick look at some of the stats that you shared on that. And there was an example where you showed a webinar that 33 people watched the webinar, but through your process of what you just explained, you got
Yeah.
11,500 views after the ads, which is really impressive, isn't it?
It's nuts how it works. And this is just one example of many. And we've done this across a number of different clients now, and I'm sure you know this across yours as well. It works. The math always plays out. The issue is that we're kind of caught up into thinking about, needing to spend money to capture a lead in that moment. And then once that event is gone, then no one wants to spend any more money doing it. But we have to remember that like part of the goal here too is we did a lot of great work creating the content and creating good stuff. Part of the goal is also getting more people to consume it. So, and not everyone's going to be able to show up at 3 p.m. on a Thursday to go to your webinar. They're just not. People are busy, they're in other meetings or they get called away or whatever. So to not give them the opportunity to consume some of that in smaller form is crazy. The other thing too to think about is that it's also a big ask for people cold that have never heard of your business before or that have never been to your webinar for them to commit to something like a 45 to 60-minute type of interaction, right? Most people are not going to take that step unless they are really, really interested in the topic. Maybe there's a great speaker. Those usually the two biggest pulls to it. So I think a great way is to say, all right, great. maybe you're not ready for the 60-minute. Let me just give you, say, the 1 minute, the 2 minute clip or whatever. And then if you are interested, whether you consume it in channel or you click on the ad, then they can watch it on demand on your website. So
What kind of targeting do you like go for when you're setting up these kinds of ads? Are there specific audiences like retargeting of people who visited the webinar like registrant page but didn't sign up and things like that? Do you put them back in front of people who even attended to just like keep it front of mind? Like what do you recommend in that regard?
yeah, so both. So retargeting, you mentioned it. Retargeting is, I
Yeah.
think, the first easy step, right? Because these are people that are already engaged with your brand, already engaged with who you are, what you do, et cetera. So a lot of times what I like to do is, you can create all sorts of retargeting audiences, whether it be like Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you're, distributing it. So you can create a 30-day layer, a 90-day layer, and a 180-day layer. That means, time from interaction, right? So within the last 30 days, I've interacted with an ad or been to the website. So typically for me, like in the 30-day, it's all about more conversion, offer, social proof, things of that nature. But once someone's 3 months out, but they've still been they've been exposed to your brand, they've had some level of engagement. That's a great place to put like newsletter, like sign up for a newsletter and content like that, or webinar clips and other things there, because it just brings people back again. And it's kind of, whether it's top of funnel content, dotted line back to your product or whatever, it's a really, really effective in that layer of getting people not only to consume the content in channel, remember too, everyone forgets everyone wants the click to landing page conversion, but get the consumption in channel with already engaged people. But then we also do targeting against the straight up ICP. So whether it's through target account list, we'll play around with that. Ideally, all of our clients have some type of target account list because sales is aligned with a tiered structure of tier 1, 2, 3, et cetera. So we usually have a target account list where we might distribute that out cold to an audience that maybe hasn't heard of the brand or hasn't been exposed to it in a while. And a lot of times we get some great engagement from that. And it brings people down into the funnel, into our targeting layer. And then that's when they drop into that 30-day mark where they just were recently on the website. And then we can at least offer up something of value of them to get them to move forward. So those are kind of the two things that, we do between targeting on webinars. But there's really no right or wrong. I mean, you can play with it. There's a lot of different ways to target. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that's getting in front of the people that fit your ICP.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting in front of people. So, it's one thing to get in front and then the next thing to stand out, which is obviously really important. We see obviously thousands of ads. There's some crazy statistics, isn't there, of how many we get exposed to on a daily basis. What makes good ad creative in your opinion? How do you then stand out amongst the crowd on the platforms?
Well, I think one big thing, since we're talking about video creative, and this is just
Yeah.
a big pet peeve that just kills me, but a thing to always watch out for is when people have these long 3 to 4 second intros with their logo and music, and then they jump into whatever the content is. And I think people forget that when you're scrolling through your newsfeed, you literally have people for split seconds. And if you're wasting all that time, and a lot of times it's these 2 4 second intros, you completely missed out. You have not offered them some type of a hook, and there's no person, there's no face. And we're all attracted by people that are faces talking like you and me. So for me, like that's a really big thing with talking about video creative that I think is a good starting point, is make sure that you have face front and center right from the beginning, go into whatever the hook is, and then obviously deliver the content. And again, sometimes that means, in these webinar clips we've been talking about, you might need to do a little bit of post editing to make sure that it's effective as an ad, because sometimes not all webinars can be broken up really well, like I'm talking about. So you kind of have to have the right content. But to me, that's a really big thing when we're talking about video creative. The other one that I see rarely done is, and I've used this example, I think in metadata and even Clearbit too, we talked about this, but a lot of people will promote ebooks and guides and things like that. And what you'll commonly see is just a picture of a book and a headline and a CTA. And like, that's it, right? And maybe that's a really compelling headline. Maybe it's like the 10 best things to do an ABM playbook, whatever the headline is. But you also have a huge opportunity with ad creative to actually optimize more for in-channel consumption. And I've said that a couple of times, and like, what does that mean? And all it means, all right, what if we were to open up the book, the ebook, the guide, whatever content we're distributing? What are some of the H1s? What are some of the headlines in that? What are some of the bits of pieces of information that we could extract? An example was that I used, I think about that presentation and another, is Gong does a lot of proprietary research with their tool. So they've got tons of data that's coming into their tool. They're a call recording software for those that don't know. And with all this data that comes in, they create these really cool blog pieces and guides where they've got these small little graphs that actually give insight. And what they're doing is, instead of just putting a picture of an ebook, they're literally using that graphic in the ad itself, whether it's a carousel, static image ad, whatever, so that you and I, if we're scrolling through the news feed, for the 99% of people that are not clicking on your ad, which sounds crazy and oh my God, why would you spend on paid? The point is that you still have a lot of people that are still seeing and hearing your name and whatever the message is in the content. And interestingly, and I'll stop myself here, but interesting, many times we actually find that the click-through rate's higher in some cases after optimizing for in-channel content. So those are two big things. I mean, there's a lot that I could go into, but I'll stop myself there. Maybe we can go back and forth on it. Anything that maybe you see too, but those would be two big things that are huge opportunities to kind of drive not only higher engagement, but also optimizing to the in-channel side of it.
Yeah, yeah. With the videos, I know we talked about videos, kind of sticking with talking about the webinars, but just moving away from repurposing webinars to just like any type of video ad. What do you think in terms of like overly professionally produced video ads versus the more kind of raw, behind the scenes, jump on the camera kind of ads?
It's a good question. We've actually tested this multiple times now. I think we've done this now 5 different times as of the last like quarter or so, to try to compare high production video and to take a kind of lower production or more authentically filmed, which I would call this not high production at this
Yeah,
point, right? If we were literally just to take this recording, this wouldn't be high production. There's no intros. There's nothing else going on, right? But not in all cases, in all the 5 cases, the lower production, more authentic looking video content performed actually better than high production. And that, because the high production content again always has those intros I'm talking about. It's intros, the music, there's all this built up stuff, there's cameras moving everywhere, and you just kind of immediately know when you're a user that it's something that's promoted versus something that's just being shared. And what I'm always trying to look for is, how do we make the content look more organic? And what I look a lot, I mean, I post a lot organically on LinkedIn. And so I'm always looking like, what are the types of video content or even text ads or other things like that that people are doing? Like, what does that content look like that's getting tons of engagement? And like literally with video, an exact example of like how we think about this, and it's just really easy. I honestly think simple is usually the best way to do it. But we just take a clip, we add a headline on it to make sure something powerful that really stands out, because that's the first thing that they're going to see. Obviously, it starts with the person's face, no intro, nothing like that. Subtitle it, done down the road, and ship that off. And whether they have their house in the background or a banner-like idea with my logo on it or something like that, whatever's fine. But I think that content, at least in the 5 cases that we've done some tests recently, always ends up playing out better. So, and again, I think it's just because it blends in with the feed, or blends in a way that it looks more like something that you'd engage with versus an ad. And that's a tough part, to kind of achieve that. So
yeah. One of the reasons I asked that is because I, quite often see an ad by Metadata. We've talked about quite a bit. We both
yeah,
work with, and it's their CEO, and he's just, kind of talking up
talking.
just as if he grabbed his
Yeah,
camera and, did a quick talk to the camera. And
yeah,
I always, when I see, obviously you can see it's sponsored, I remember thinking the first time I saw that, that's so interesting. Obviously, a company like that could have just gone into a studio and had all the lighting and this and that and the other, but instead
exactly.
he's just jumping on camera, and they are, clearly people know what they're doing, who are doing this, and this obviously it works.
Exactly. And I remember that
Yeah,
video. I mean, I think he said
yeah,
something about, hey, marketers, hey, you're
that's it.
probably taking off our content or ads or blah, 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 whatever. And I think they used in the retargeting layer, if I remember correctly. But
Yeah,
yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, that's the type of content that's super authentic. It's real. It's, just Jason being a normal person and not, being also too scripted too. So there's even some ums and stuff like that, and not perfectly, delivered language, like that type of thing, I think does really well. Cause then you automatically know like, oh, this person's like talking more genuinely. And I think that type of content always does better. I think the difficulty is that a lot of people are not comfortable doing what Jason's doing.
yeah,
They don't want to be on camera, and they don't feel comfortable doing that type of thing,
yeah,
or they feel like, oh, that's too low production. People are going to think I'm unprofessional, and I need to
yeah,
do something. I need to spend 10, 20, whatever amount of thousands of dollars ultimately to create something that's really crisp and perfect. And that's what I think stops a lot of people. And it's such a bummer because even with a small team and a small budget, like we all are probably dealing with in 2023, you can still do a lot with some video content, some very easy little scripts. And I'm not saying like read the script, but just some very easy kind of outlines
Yeah.
and get it done. So I love that ad. It's a good one.
Yeah, it stands out. I agree with you. I have sales calls quite often with people where something that really puts them off is the fact that they don't have a studio at the moment with a production team and all the high value, really like high production value. And just like you said, they're put off by it because they say, well, I think we'll go ahead with this, but we're just going to have to wait like 6 months until we fitted out the studio and hired the videographer and things like that. And I always try to explain there's a happy medium here. I'm not saying it extremely low production value, but you don't have to do an awful lot to still create, but you don't have to invest
Right.
loads and hire a studio and things like that. There's something in the middle that works well. Hey, just a little break from this week's episode to let you know about becoming a Content 10x Insider. If you want more content repurposing tips and advice, then why not join hundreds of business owners, marketers, and content creators who get them delivered straight to their inbox once a week by subscribing to the Content 10x newsletter. As well as tips and advice, you get industry updates, inspiring stories, exclusive content, offers, and more. You can subscribe at content10x.com/newsletter, and there's a link in the show notes too. Okay, back to this week's episode.
Yeah. And clearly, clearly to your point, I mean, like there's got to be a level of quality, clearly,
Yeah,
right? If you got a really grainy image or people can't hear you well with your audio. I mean, clearly those things need to be, fixed. But I mean, most computers these days, new ones, I mean, I've got a MacBook Pro with a Retina lens on it. I mean, pretty crisp, right? I could get another side camera if I really wanted to, that would be even crisper. But I mean, generally speaking, like that's going to be sufficient to get you down the road. And then you can always build onto it, right? You can always make it a little bit more advanced in terms of quality. But I think that those are the types of things you shouldn't let slow you down,
no,
because you just have to think about, all of the potential people that you're not reaching today by not doing this. And
yeah,
that's the risk, right? It's the risk of opportunity of saying, okay, now I've got a dead webinar on my website, or a blog even is a great example, just blogs that are sitting on my website, maybe they're SEO. They've got a technical SEO agency going through, which is fine and great, and they should do that. But why not also get that content inside the channel directly to the people that you want to reach? And I think that's an interesting thing that we haven't talked about either. But
yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to. Something I wanted to go onto, which is channel actually. So the platforms that you've got everything these days: LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the different platforms.
yeah,
Do you guys at Omni Lab, do you specialize in a particular platform?
uh, I mean, I'd say the two that we do the most in terms of advertising are Google and LinkedIn, are
Oh,
the two
okay.
two most common. Um, but we don't specialize in one. We've got clients that are on YouTube and others, right? But I think in terms of B2B, like every single one of our clients is on LinkedIn and Google Ads, 100%. So that would be the common thread.
Yeah. What's your response to people who complain that LinkedIn ads are too expensive, which often you hear is a big objection, isn't it? They're really
Yeah.
expensive. How do you handle that one?
Well, the short story is it's pretty easy because usually people are comparing Facebook to LinkedIn,
Yeah,
and CPMs and CPCs are cheaper on Facebook. But what you're not considering is the targeting, and the targeting is the biggest thing. And in Facebook world, unless you're using third-party data, which still isn't perfect, like Clearbit and metadata, they've got ways to do firmographic-based targeting and upload lists matching personal and work emails to improve targeting. But then also remember, you're paying a vendor more money per month to do that. So that's going to up your CPCs and CPMs if you include that cost into that. But the big thing is you just have to think about it. I mean, LinkedIn literally has probably one of the most up-to-date networks for title-based, where you work, skills you have, all sorts of things. And people are incentivized to keep those up to date because they act as resumes and all sorts of things. Whereas Facebook in the B2B world, I don't think I've updated I hope my title's right. I have no clue what it says on there, to be honest. I'm honestly not on Facebook a whole lot anymore. I'm on Instagram though, but not as much on Facebook. So, I think that that's the big takeaway for me is you just have to ultimately say, all right, if I'm going to spend some money, do I want to spend some money on a broader audience where maybe 20, 30, 40% of those people are really not the best fit for my brand and pay a lower price? Or do I want to spend a little bit more and have my messaging or content or whatever go directly to the people that are a best fit for my ICP? And I think most people, when you kind of walk them through that, they're like, okay, yeah, I guess it does make sense to spend a little more money. The other thing I'd say, one last thing on this, is that everyone's always considering the cost of the typical thing that everyone wants in advertising. They're just considering put up the ad, get the click, go to the landing page, convert, right? And I think that as soon as you start weighing in the cost, and I think I did this on talking with Creative P, one of the guys out of Romania, and we did a webinar together. And basically, we were just running the math on running video view type campaigns and whatnot. And you can start to look at the cost per click. We found that it was like between $15 and $20 or something like that a click. And this was on LinkedIn. But when you start considering the people that were consuming that video and channel and watching, say, 75% or more, the cost was something like $4 to $5. So you just have to kind of like think about these things a little bit different and frame them up. So that's what I would say to that. But yeah, it is ultimately more expensive, but you're getting it for the right people. So
Yeah, yeah, you get what you pay for.
yeah,
It's a
you
higher
do.
quality level. Yeah.
You do.
Um, it, we've been talking about repurposing webinars and slicing and dicing them down into videos and running social ads. So let's say that you don't have a video, but you're looking at other content and you're thinking, I want to repurpose this into something in a shorter, snackable format, and then I'm going to run some ads on that. And you have a written piece of content. So you've got a cornerstone pillar blog post or a research report, white paper, something like that. And so often when we're working with like written content, we'll be turning it into like image slider carousels for LinkedIn and single images and things like that. So
Yeah.
usually going to visual posts really. What do you see working well in the world of if you're going to do that with the primary intention of I'm going to repurpose this into some visual content and then I'm going to put some ad spend on those content pieces on LinkedIn. What do you see working well, like image carousels, particular types of graphics? Is anything standing out?
Carousels are interesting. We do a lot of carousels. I think that the one comes immediately more to mind to me is, and Cognizant's probably a good example of someone who I think's done a good job at. Now they've got a big marketing team to do all this, but I think they've done a good job at taking a lot of their blog posts and then creating highlight reels in video format, and then those are attached to the blog, and they use those in paid ads as well. For example, like they ran something that was a customer case study. They ran in the retargeting layer, and they just had one of their marketing managers record a quick video that highlighted some of the takeaways from the case study. And so now you've got a piece of content that was previously just sitting on the website in text-based form, and now you've turned that in just what you said, into a visual of some kind. In this case, it was a video. The other example is the one I kind of mentioned before that I think is still a good one, but finding statistics, or ideally, I mean, hopefully the content's really good, right? If you get some like unique statistic or interesting finding or experiment you've run, then turning that into either a slideshow or a carousel, or even just putting the graphic into a single image ad would be perfectly fine too, where they can still get some of the value directly in the ad itself. And then again, you can use that graphic if it wasn't already on your blog or your text-based piece of content, and then use that to make the content a lot richer, right? Instead of just a bunch of words, now you've got very cool visuals along the way. And I think Gong is again another example of creating some of this different layered content inside a lot of their content. And then of course they just pump and reuse all that in ads. So those are two easy ones. Don't see either of them done often at all, though, to be honest. And it's one of those things I think probably comes down to time to a degree. And, most people are just like, I barely have enough time to get out a really good piece of content, every once in a while. So to say that I'm now going to create a like 2 to 3 minute video on top of that is a lot. But to me, if you know the content, you've read it, and maybe you're the SME and you record it, we're talking, I mean, again, a 2 to 3 minute video. I mean, maybe script it out a little bit, but if you kind of know what you're talking about, even being a little authentic and losing your place, you can always do some quick post editing and then you're down the road.
Yeah.
So those are the two that I'd say they kind of stand out the most in terms of things that we've done with some clients and seen some pretty good results with.
Interesting. And something you mentioned earlier was in-channel ads, like optimizing for in-channel engagement as opposed to always having that CTA to go elsewhere. So in the example of breaking like a blog post down or white paper research down, the natural inclination is to think, well, surely my CTA is going to be to go get this blog post or go,
Right.
here's a link externally. You've said a couple of times about in channel like ads, keeping, I guess, like the 0-click ads of keeping people within the platform. Could you
Exactly.
talk a bit about that, like what you've seen and how important you think that is?
I think it's huge. And I think it actually just comes down to one very simple thing. It's more aligning with how people want to consume information over anything else. And I think if you start to think like how you are and how you consume as a buyer, you'll quickly realize that the action that you don't take a lot or as much is immediately click on ad, go hang out on a website and start reading all their blog content. Many times what you're doing is you're just kind of scrolling through the feed and you're consuming it right there in channel. And it's a very common thing. I've talked to hundreds of people about this. And you just ask them like, what's your behavior? I mean, when you think about content or engaging material that you're looking at, like, what do you do? Like, what do you, walk me through the experience, right? And like, those are the types of things they're saying. So, I mean, yeah, that Creative webinar was exactly about that, 0-click ads. And even Amanda from Spark Turo has created some content around this. And I don't know if she coined it or maybe someone else did, who knows? And it doesn't really matter. But she did a really great blog post on 0-click content and the same general type of idea. And she kind of broke down thinking about the organic side of it, especially, and how a lot of these platforms actually disincentivize putting links inside the posts and things like that on LinkedIn, which is why we always commonly hear, put the link in the comments. I'm not sure quite. I never know how these things are valid. I don't know who validates these things, but at any rate, I think the reason for that though is because LinkedIn, Facebook, or any ad channel, they make their money off of ads, predominantly all of them. So minus LinkedIn's got the recruiting aspect, but the point is that the longer they can keep eyeballs on their channel, the more impressions they can deliver, the more clicks that they can get, and ultimately that's what advertisers want. So what you're doing is LinkedIn's incentivizing this, and even they launched a new ad format called document ads. And so now on the 0-click movement, you can now upload your guide or your PDF that you typically would just create like a single image ad or carousel or whatever format you want to create it in, whether it's gated or ungated, blah, 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 you can figure that out. But now you can actually just load up the actual piece of content and have them kind of swipe through just like a carousel, but instead it's the actual document itself. And you got to be a little careful with mobile optimization, stuff like that on those. But anyway, to me, like this is one of the biggest things. I think it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger. I don't think all brands will immediately jump on it because most are stuck on kind of the attribution problem, which is making sure they get click-based attribution to understand the results that they're getting. But I think those that can let go of the reins a little bit will have a lot more freedom to think about how they create more content for how buyers actually want to consume. And that's the big point for me.
It's funny, I had Amanda Natividad on the podcast a little bit ago, and we did a
Oh, cool.
half-hour discussion or so about 0-click content. And I'm just
No, that's
thinking
great.
that we didn't really delve into the world of sort of paid. We talked mainly about organic when we were talking about it. I was wondering if you are running some paid campaigns with 0-click ads, and if you're pleasing the platforms, as you said, you'll be pleasing them by not having those external clicks. Do you think that would give you more favor on that platform, that when you then run some organic content, and perhaps that does have some clicks, but just generally your organic content, if your ads are going really well and you're not sending people away and it's 0-click, is it going to boost your page overall from?
I don't have data to say that there's an exact correlation in the way that you just said it right there, but I would say that those that have a really strong organic presence, ideally from their personal profiles and not just the company page and posting on that, and again, I think it's more correlation and looking at trends than like hard black and white facts that we've looked at through some of our clients. But I can tell you that a lot of the clients that are very active organically on channels that we're actually doing paid ads on, a lot of times they'll perform a lot better because there's already a familiarity with who's the face behind this company.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's so important. And this is why you get all these people talking about personal branding all day long and whatnot. And, whether it's personal branding or just having your face out there talking about the typical category that you guys operate in and trying to deliver value, that type of stuff, it makes a huge impact. Again, black and white correlation, couldn't tell you, but I think we definitely tend to see higher engagement rates in those. And we're trying to get more of our clients to invest more in having an organic strategy, because the other thing you could do too, which is kind of interesting, and this is more of a tactical hack, if you will, but you can take say an organic post that got, say, a lot of engagement, maybe got 20, 50, 100 likes, whatever a lot of engagement is for you. And then you can take a snapshot of that and then use that actual image, the text that you wrote in the post, as the actual ad itself. And then what it does is it's a little tricky, right, in a way, because number one, it looks like it's just a regular organic post. So it kind of blends into the typical thing you're used to reading. But the amazing thing about it is that it's also, again, like I've been saying a couple times, is that in organic, you have the issue of a lot of people that are engaging with your post might not be the best fit. There might be some, but there's always going to be people that are not really your true ICP. Paid guarantees, to a degree, for those that at least are active on the channel, that those right people in your ICP are going to see the message. So you could actually take a really cool, organic, engaging post and then be like, cool, a lot of people saw this. That's awesome. And then use the social proof inside your ad, instead of like waiting for social proof to build up on the ad itself. So anyway, that's a little idea that we've been doing with some clients, and it actually works quite well, honestly. So
That's an amazing tip. I love that. That's fantastic. Thank you.
yeah, try it out. I mean, not a marketing strategy by any stretch, but it's a little tactic. So,
Yeah, a little tactic. It's good. Yeah.
yeah.
Final question for you, Jonathan. So someone's been listening to this and they're just like hugely inspired to start creating content in the way we've been explaining, maybe repurposing down some of their content for social ads. What is the biggest or a main mistake that a lot of people make that they should try and avoid?
Mistake with repurposing content.
With the ad side of it, with running the ads from the repurposed content.
I'd say the biggest one is you have to change your mindset on attribution, because as soon as you start, especially as we were talking about before, as soon as you start, especially, this kind of relates a little bit to in channels, maybe not answering your question as directly as you want, but this kind of relates back to, if you're going to start taking content and then putting it in a format that can be consumed more in channel, you have to let go of the reins of your strict rules on attribution, because you're just not going to get it. It's not gonna happen. And you're going to have to just be comfortable with the idea of looking at leading indicators, which lots of people call those vanity metrics. But in the world of demand gen, they're still very, very important. And you still need those to get the pipeline and revenue. So clearly, like, if you're just optimizing for vanity and leading and you're not getting the lag income together, clearly there's an issue there, but they're still very important. So I think the biggest thing to me is just making sure that you're measuring the success of each of those campaigns the right way. And realizing that, like, not every campaign should be measured the same way. I mean, most B2B SaaS companies have a primary goal of getting more inbound demo requests or more trials, and then ultimately those to pipeline. Like, those are the goals, right? But not every campaign should be gold and scored on just that one thing. I mean, I'll give one last example and then we can jump off. But, in a cold campaign on LinkedIn or Facebook or something like that, when I'm targeting someone that's never heard of my company before, I can't goal that campaign off of request to demo or something like that. Like, the conversion rate is going to be so low, and you're going to completely walk away from LinkedIn. In that cold layer, it's all about building some initial awareness, getting some content in front of that person, and making sure that you're even a known entity. And then once you're known, then you can move them down into other layers and, see if they're ready to take that next step with you. But I'm not a big believer in this whole kind of like moving people through funnels. So I guess that's the wrap for me is, the summary of what I just said is, make sure that you're setting the right types of KPIs and measuring success on some of these campaigns, and not just using one metric across all.
Yeah. Brilliant tip. Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that it's been such a great conversation. I'm sure that everyone's going to have taken so much away from it. Where would you like people to go to connect with you and find out more?
Easiest way is find me on LinkedIn. So Jonathan Bland is my full name. We can look for Omni Lab in case there's another. I don't think there is, but there probably is somewhere. Or you can go to omnilabconsulting.com if you are interested at all in us doing paid ads for your company. We generally work with seed to Series C companies. So if you're in that range and you've got some good traction closer to product market fit, maybe paid ads is a good time for you to kind of jump in and scale up. So
yeah, 100%. I will put the links to everything, so it's super easy to get hold of in the show notes. Right. Well, thank you so much. It's been an awesome conversation. So thanks for coming on the Content 10X podcast.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. It's great.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that discussion and thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the Content 10X podcast, then why not hit that subscribe button on your podcast listening app of choice so that you can get updated when new episodes are released. And I'd really, really appreciate it if you could leave a review as well. That really makes a difference for the podcast. Also, please do get a copy of my book, Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results. It is the ultimate guide to repurposing every type of content, and it's available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback and also in audiobook as well. And you can head to content10x.com/book to find all the other places that you can get a copy of my book. And if you would like us to do your content repurposing for you, then we offer a fully end-to-end done for you content repurposing service. This is for podcasters and video content creators. We have our podcast 10x, video 10x, and also our specific LinkedIn 10x service, helping you to become the leading authority in your industry on LinkedIn. You can find out so much more about our services on our website. And also, please do give me a follow on the social media platforms. I share lots and lots of tips and advice on social media about content repurposing. I'm at Content 10x on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And if you try content10x.com/LinkedIn, you'll find my LinkedIn profile over there as well. All that's left to say is thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.